A few years ago, when I was in my 20s, I was in a terrible car accident. A drunk truck driver crashed into my car, and I was hospitalized for several weeks. I broke my arm, and it took a very long time to learn how to walk again. It took even longer for all the scars to heal. It has been almost 3 years since the accident. Even though it wasn't my fault, I still drive with extreme caution. The only thing I remember from that accident is that my family refused to come to the hospital for me. The reason was that my sister went into labor. Ironically, I was on my way to surprise my sister at the hospital where she was scheduled to give birth. But I got into a car accident on the way. It was only a few weeks before the end of the year. The place I lived was only a few hours away from my hometown, so it was very convenient to travel back and forth. When I got a call from my parents saying my sister was in labor and rushing to the hospital, I decided to surprise her. I borrowed a friend's car and drove to the hospital. However, I got into an accident on the way and was rushed to the nearest hospital. My parents were too busy with my sister, so a friend stayed by my side at that time. What particularly disappointed me was that even days after my sister gave birth, my parents didn't come to check on me. I knew the situation wasn't ideal, but it still upset me. Despite being in severe pain and feeling dazed after the accident, I repeatedly called my parents. Every time a hospital staff member came to check on me, I kept asking if my parents had called or come to see me. Each time I heard their response, I felt disappointed. Finally, a week after the accident, I received a call from my parents. But it wasn't to ask if I was okay. It was to ask why I had been calling so often. They said they had been ignoring my calls because they were with my sister and her baby. I was shocked by their cold attitude, especially considering the situation. But I still asked about my sister and the baby. They told me my sister and my newborn niece were fine. I thought they must have already known I was in an accident, but they didn't ask about me. My friends told me they had sent messages to my parents through every platform. So my parents should have already known about the accident. I decided to provide the information myself. I told them about the accident and how I'd been trying to inform them for days. At that point, I at least expected some kind of reaction. But they just said they already knew from my friends and didn't say anything more. I was furious and asked if they couldn't even pretend to care about me. They told me they didn't want to talk to me because they prioritized being with my sister during her childbirth over being by my side after the accident. They deliberately ignored my calls and messages because of that. I couldn't understand what they were saying. As far as I knew, the truck driver was drunk, and the accident wasn't my fault. But they said that didn't mean I wasn't responsible. They blamed me for deciding to drive alone, calling it irresponsible. They said it was very late at night, and there was no reason for me to go driving. When I told them I was driving to the hospital to see my sister, they said I didn't need to do that. They told me the accident was entirely my fault. It was so cruel and insensitive of them to say that. I was so angry that I hung up without saying anything else. Later, I found out that when the people who discovered me at the accident site called 911, they contacted my parents first. My parents refused to come and asked not to be called about the matter again. The authorities then contacted my friends because I had their contact details with me. That's how my friends found out about the accident. Even when emergency services told my parents to rush to the hospital because their daughter had been in an accident, they didn't come. Their only response to the situation was to blame me for what happened. After that incident, I realized that while I did my best for my family, they had no interest in being there for me. Even my sister didn't try to contact me. I haven't been in touch with my family for the past 3 years since that incident. I have completely given up on them. Before this, we had a normal relationship, but I always felt like I was being sidelined as the older sister because my sister was prioritized. My family proved that to me when I had that accident. For the record, I'm not mad at my parents for not coming to see me while my sister was giving birth. However, I was angry that they didn't think it was important to come see me even after my sister had given birth. I didn't even expect my sister to visit me in the hospital. At that time, it was clearly impossible for her to do so right after giving birth. But it wasn't impossible for my parents. My sister had her husband and in-laws to take care of her. I only had my friends. Fortunately, I had friends good enough to stay by my side and help me recover. They and their parents covered all the costs of my recovery and other expenses. I am still repaying them, but I am truly grateful for everything they did for me. At the time, I couldn't afford to handle the expenses myself anyway. It's been 3 years since the incident, and they still haven't tried to contact me. Many of my relatives are wondering why I no longer keep in touch. I kept all the reasons for this to myself. There was an unspoken agreement not to talk about the incident with anyone in the family. I had adhered to that until recently, but now they've decided to discuss it. One of my aunts contacted me afterward. That's because my parents had framed the story in a way that painted me as the villain. This happened a few weeks ago, when my parents hosted a dinner party at their house to celebrate my sister's promotion at work. While everyone was together, the topic of my estrangement from the family came up. After repeated questioning, my parents finally decided to explain the situation after 3 years. They must have thought there was no need to keep it a secret anymore. However, when they told the story, they conveniently altered the facts of what happened after my accident. Some parts were true, like how I planned to surprise my sister at the hospital and got into a car accident on the way. But then they claimed they hadn't heard from me. They said they found out about the accident days later. By then, so much time had passed that they were preoccupied with my sister and her baby. They also said they hadn't thought much about why I didn't reach out. When they finally got in touch with me, they claimed the first thing they did was call me. They said I was so angry with them that I refused to talk. But that was completely untrue. They further claimed they had tried to contact me several times after that. But I allegedly kept refusing their calls due to the incident, so they eventually gave up trying to reach me. They essentially portrayed the entire situation as a misunderstanding on my part. They made me out to be an utterly unforgiving villain toward them. In other words, after 3 years of silence, my parents started lying about me at a family gathering. They spread a false story that I abruptly refused contact after the accident. They claimed they had tried multiple times to reach me but couldn't. It was as if I had irrationally severed ties with my parents out of anger. One of my aunts contacted me after the family party celebrating my sister's promotion at work. Her voice was trembling on the phone, and she was clearly upset. When I told my aunt the truth, she was astonished. "I've learned that your parents have been telling such horrible lies," she said. Her words made all the emotions I'd been holding back for years come flooding to the surface. Since childhood, I was always compared to my sister. I still vividly remember the elementary school sports day. I was chosen as a relay runner and practiced hard. My team finished in second place. But my parents' attention was only on my sister, who was the cheerleading captain. "I wish you could stand out like your sister," my mother said. Her words still linger in my ears. The day I brought home my report card was always nerve-wracking. Even if I got an A grade, they would ask, "Why isn't it a perfect score?" Meanwhile, my sister, who got a B grade, would be praised with, "You did so well." On the day of my junior high school closing ceremony, I wasn't feeling well from the stress of test week. But my parents went to my sister's extracurricular performance instead. They left with the words, "You're the stronger one." In high school, I was desperate to balance academics and club activities. I also served as the student council president and secured a university recommendation. But my parents' attention was focused on my sister, who landed the lead role in the drama club. Looking back, the difference in how my sister and I were treated was most apparent during family trips. In the summer of my second year in junior high, we went to Napa Valley. It was a luxurious trip where we stayed at a high-end hotel, but it was to celebrate my sister's victory in a choir competition. When I had won an award in the state science competition the previous year, all I got was a congratulations. At the hotel, my sister got the bed with the best view. I got a cramped spot near the door. "You're the stronger one." That phrase was always used to justify my patience. At dinner, the menu was centered around my sister's favorite dishes, with no consideration for the foods I disliked. The disparity was clear even in club activities. I participated in the state swimming competition, but my parents didn't come, saying they were too busy. On the other hand, they often went to cheer at my sister's volleyball practice games. "Your sister is emotionally delicate." That was another excuse I frequently heard. Even my university acceptance was overshadowed by news of my sister participating in a drama competition. The pattern didn't change after I became an adult. After graduating from university, I joined an IT company and steadily built my career as a systems engineer. I worked overtime willingly and actively learned new skills. At 25, I became an assistant manager, and at 28, I was promoted to project manager. My father said, "You're too serious." Meanwhile, my sister, who had dropped out of university and started working as a temp, was praised as finding her own path. At my first promotion celebration, my father changed the topic by saying, "I hope your sister finds a job soon." My mother indirectly asked for help by saying, "You're stable, so please support your sister too." I started sending money to my parents when my father fell ill and retired early. Initially, it was $500 a month. But my mother said, "Your sister will need money for her wedding too," and the amount gradually increased. Before I knew it, $1,000 a month became the norm. I gave up on buying my own apartment and lived a modest life in a small unit. Even so, I endured it because I thought I was helping my family. As my salary increased and bonuses grew, my parents' demands also escalated. "We need to save for your sister's wedding fund. We should start thinking about renovating the house." Before I knew it, more than a third of my income was disappearing from my parents and sister. Just as I was trying to save for a down payment on my own apartment, news of my sister's wedding came up. "You have savings, so it'll be fine, right?" my sister said, leaving no room for me to argue. I was asked not only to cover the $20,000 wedding costs, but also to help with the down payment for her new home, which completely drained my savings. On the wedding day, I managed everything from decorating the venue to handling the reception and arranging photography. Even so, my parents' speech was filled with blessings for my sister and her husband, with not a single word of gratitude for me. Watching my sister in her wedding dress posing for photos with our parents, I quietly left the venue. My life took a drastic turn on the day of the accident. While I was stopped at a traffic light, a drunk truck driver crashed into my car at full speed. As the violent impact blurred my consciousness, my thoughts were on my parents. In the ambulance, barely conscious, I kept repeating, "Please contact my parents." However, my parents refused to take the emergency responders' calls. Their reason was that they were busy attending my sister's childbirth. Lying alone on the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, I kept pondering the meaning of family. The pain in my broken arm seemed smaller compared to the pain in my heart. Rehabilitation was grueling. Walking exercises, arm therapy, none of it progressed as I hoped, and I often felt like giving up. At those times, it was my friends who supported me. They took turns visiting my hospital room, constantly offering words of encouragement. Their parents even covered my medical expenses, making it possible for me to continue treatment. Yet, my parents never visited me, not even once. The hardest moment came in the second week of rehab. I had just started walking exercises, gripping the parallel bars, and taking one determined step at a time. A nurse encouraged me, saying, "Take it slow, you're doing great." Sweating, I pushed through the training. My friend Mary visited me almost daily. She would stop by after work, always bringing my favorite books or magazines. "If your parents won't come, I'll be your family instead," she said. How many times did her words bring me to tears? Even my boss was understanding, telling me, "Take your time and focus on healing." My colleagues took turns visiting me, sharing updates about the office. Their presence made me feel connected to society. By the 3rd month of rehab, I was finally able to walk on my own. My doctor told me, "Your strong will is the reason you've recovered so quickly." But I knew the truth. It was because of the unwavering support of my friends. Meanwhile, my parents still hadn't visited. After my sister gave birth, my mother sent me an email once, but all it contained was a photo of the baby. Not a single word about my condition or well-being. Even so, strangely enough, I didn't immediately stop sending money. The habit of transferring $1,000 every month continued even after the accident. Perhaps, deep down, I hoped it was my last chance, that my parents would realize their mistakes and we could mend our relationship. But that hope was utterly betrayed. My parents began distorting the truth about the accident in front of our relatives, as if I had rejected them out of unreasonable anger and severed the family ties. When I heard the truth from my aunt, something inside me broke irreparably. On the day I made arrangements to stop the transfers, the bank clerk looked puzzled. "Are you sure you want to suddenly stop a transfer you've maintained for years?" they asked. I calmly replied, "Yes, it's no longer necessary." At that moment, my heart felt inexplicably lighter. It was as if I had finally been freed from the burden I had carried for so many years. After that, my parents' lifestyle changed drastically. The overseas trips they took every year became impossible. Dining out at high-end restaurants was no longer feasible. Even my sister had to start a weekend part-time job to cover her living expenses after my parents' financial support ceased. My parents' responses shifted gradually. At first, I was bombarded with angry messages. "I can't believe you could do this to us. How could you abandon your family?" These accusations came almost daily. However, as financial reality set in, their tone began to soften. "We were truly sorry for what happened back then. We should have been more considerate. We should have thought about your feelings." But those words of apology were always followed by, "Our life is really hard now. Could you please help us somehow?" It wasn't genuine regret, but calculated apologies driven by economic necessity. My sister's reactions were even more intense. "You know our parents are living on their pension, right? My child's education costs are tough too. How can you be so heartless to your family?" Ironically, that word, family, was what I had needed most during the accident. The reactions from relatives varied. My uncle said, "A spoiled younger sister and an older sister who has been taken advantage of. This is the natural outcome," supporting my decision. When I showed hospital records and transfer histories, many relatives came to understand my decision. In particular, my aunt became a significant source of support. "You've done more than enough for your family. It's time for you to live your own life." Those words gave me confidence that my decision was the right one. 6 months have passed since I cut off financial support, and my life has changed significantly. I started attending a photography class, a long-held dream of mine. The instructor, Mr. Smith, praised the unique perspective in my work. "Your photographs capture the subtleties of life," he said, bringing tears to my eyes. I began going on photography trips with classmates from the course during weekends. Even when they learned about my past, they never judged me negatively. In fact, they supported my decision. I've become particularly close friends with Carla, who also attends the class. We've developed a relationship where we can share our struggles with one another. At work, I was chosen as the leader for a new project. Previously, I used to take on overtime to support my family financially. Now, I use my time for personal fulfillment. I've started going out for meals with my team members after work, and with one of them, I felt a special bond beginning to form. As my savings grew, I was finally able to purchase the condominium I had always dreamed of. A bright living room filled with sunlight, walls where I can display my favorite photographs, and a peaceful space all to myself. I feel this is the beginning of my new life. On weekends, I host home parties and invite the friends who supported me during my rehab days. They genuinely celebrated my new life and said, "You're finally living as your true self." Above all, I feel happiness in being surrounded by people who understand and value me. Even without the ties of blood, I have found a bond that is genuine, based on mutual understanding and support. I heard that my parents were forced to give up the house they had lived in for many years. They had fallen behind on mortgage payments. Their new residence is an old apartment building, a 20-minute walk from the nearest station. There's no elevator, and they struggle with climbing the stairs every day. They had to sell most of their furniture and appliances. I heard my mother tearfully sold her expensive dishes and sentimental belongings. During the move, they were subjected to the curious eyes of their neighbors and couldn't even lift their heads. My sister's finances also became increasingly strained. Her relationship with her husband deteriorated, and even his parents accused her, saying, "Why should we be dragged into your family's problems?" At a family meeting that I attended, my uncle directed harsh words at my parents. "After exploiting your eldest daughter for so many years, how can you say anything now?" Another aunt added, "This is the result of favoring your younger daughter and treating her this way." My parents kept their heads down the entire time, unable to find words to defend themselves. Once the center of family gatherings, my parents are now no longer even invited. The same is true for my sister. I heard that during the Christmas family gathering, no seats were prepared for my parents or my sister's family. It seems my mother, in particular, is struggling mentally. To avoid running into acquaintances at the supermarket, she now shops at stores far from home. My father has stopped going golfing on weekends, his favorite hobby, and tends to stay home. I also heard that no one attended my niece's birthday party. Although invitations were sent, everyone declined, citing other commitments. While I feel sorry for the child, who bears no fault, I also understand this is the result of my parents' and sister's actions. Recently, my parents' health has also been declining. Living in a low-cost apartment for pensioners has likely been more difficult than they anticipated. I've heard their air conditioning broke, and they couldn't afford to repair it, leaving it as is. Sometimes I feel a pang of pain in my chest, but this change was necessary. For the first time, I feel like I'm truly living my own life. It's a life not spent meeting someone else's expectations or enduring for someone else's sake, but a life for myself. If not for the accident, I might never have come to this realization. Perhaps people only recognize the weight of their past mistakes when they face hardship. But how much value is there in repentance driven by financial necessity? It may seem cold, but this is the path I've chosen. And for the first time, I feel true freedom.